Good evening. I want to take this time to welcome everyone to the Board of Directors agenda meeting for September the 13th, 2022. This is our opportunity to review the agenda for our former board meeting that will be held on September the 20th, 2022. We do have a proclamation to be read today in honor of Peace Week. As it states, whereas our lives continue to be scarred by the consequences, violence, and war in communities, our state, our country, and across the world. And whereas Arkansas Peace Week is a program of activities with a mission to educate and promote peacemaking in our society and raise awareness of organizations working to build a lasting peace in Arkansas. And whereas Peace Week celebrates nonviolence as a means to instill justice, build stronger communities, alleviate poverty, promote ecological stewardship, end war, eliminate scourge of violence in our society while seeking respect, inclusion, and fair treatment of all people. And whereas during the third week of September in observance of the United Nations International Day of Peace, Arkansas Peace Week includes numerous events hosted by dozens of organizations throughout the state. These events feature education, service, dialogue, and outreach activities promoting the mission. And whereas the 2022 theme for the International Day of Peace is End Racism, Build Peace, building on this theme, we will work towards a city free of racism and racial discrimination, a city where compassion and empathy overcome suspicion and hatred. And whereas Arkansas Peace Week will partner with the Little Rock School District and the Central High School National Historic Site to provide Arkansas's youth education, service, and outreach activities. And whereas the lessons learned and relationships formed during this week create a foundation for continuing a sustainable peace in our society throughout the year. And whereas in a furtherance of Peace Week efforts, all Little Rock residents have a role to play in fostering peace. In tackling racism in a crucial way to contribute, we work towards a Little Rock free of racism and racial discrimination, where compassion and empathy overcome suspicion and hatred. Now, therefore, I, Frank Scott Jr., Mayor of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim September 18th through the 25th of 2022 as Peace Week. All right, we have three modifications for today's agenda. Item 1 is an addition where we are adding the towing service contract. Item 16 is being deferred until October the 4th, 2022 at staff's request. And item 19 is being withdrawn. Director Adcock?
Yes, I have a question on M1, please.
Yes, ma'am. Your question?
Is Mr. Hinton here?
He is out today.
Okay, the question is how many towing companies have applied for this?
Mr. Moore, I do believe it's, Mr. Moore?
Sure. If you pull up Angie or...
Oh, there's Mr. Hinton, I'm sorry.
But we can still pull it up to show how many, you pull up M1. Well, the question is how many towing companies applied?
5.
Okay, and these are all single companies, not any companies that has 2 locations?
East End purchased Rathrucker, and they bid it as Pinnacle doing business as Rathrucker, I believe. So Tom and I talked about that because we have multiple companies in the city that could bid under multiple entities. And while we couldn't stop people from bidding on multiple entities, we have control over how we rotate them with communications. So how we're going to handle that, those two entities are going to be rotated as if there were one.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Those two entities are going to be rotated as if they were one, right? Because we don't want to open the Pandora's box where we have Asher bidding as 4 entities, which they could do, right? So Tom and I talked about it, and we have control in rules and regulations how we're going to rotate people.
So you have 5 people or 5 groups, but you're going to have 4 rotations.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions on items 10 through 15? Director Wright? You don't? Lieutenant Cook? Yes, ma'am.
On item 14, this is regarding the Autumn Road development. I believe that's now Ward 4, and they have it listed as 6, Mr. Moore.
We'll confirm that.
Director Peck, am I correct?
Yes.
She's been getting
We'll change
all the calls.
Thank you, Doris.
You're welcome. Anything that
You know
gets,
what I'm talking about. Thanks a lot.
anything that gets developed on that site is going to be problematic. So just, if this doesn't do it, something else will. So anyway, Mr. Moore, well, you hadn't got to 17 yet, but I wanted to have a question about 17.
While you have the floor.
Okay. Mr. Moore, what is this Computer Career Pathways course? Who will be taking that?
Sure. I don't know if Mr. Sanders is here. This is a program, if you could pull item 17 up, Susan, that's 17. Program through workforce development that the city received funding for. And so we're sort of a pass-through for this particular program. And can I see number 17?
Is this for all citizens of Little Rock or just city employees or?
No, this is for citizens of Little Rock that are eligible. This isn't city employees.
Okay, yeah, that was part of my question.
This is, we're using, this is TANF funds that the state applied for and received, and thus the city, they awarded to the city to provide this
And it's
service.
for adults or youth?
Adults.
Okay, thank you.
Director Wyrick?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like a presentation on 11, 13, and 15, please.
Let me clarify, it's actually for youth development services in high poverty areas of Little Rock.
Youth,
Yes.
what ages?
I'll get that for you.
Okay, forward that to me, I'd like to know, thank you.
Ally, on 11, can we bring up the zoning map, please? Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, Director Wyrick what this property is they are looking to redevelop the tract of land to a planned development commercial. Background on this was approved by the board in 2021 for a towing company.
That's what I thought, okay.
And that's what this is. It's 9715 Colonel Glenn. So what they're looking to do is repurpose this property for a storage facility. So I believe, is there a sketch plan on there? So this is kind of oriented, so north would be to your left, okay? South would be to your right. And so in this development, they are going to try to utilize some of the existing facilities, but then they're also going to, demolish some existing, but they're going to also try to use some of the existing that's out there. So they've got a list of units that they're doing. So it ranges from 12 by 30 units, 10 by 25 units, 14 foot by 45 units, all the way down to 19 and a half feet by 30 foot units. All of the proposed buildings will be 1 story in height. Their operational hours for the office will be 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. They're not proposing any dumpsters on site or additional any site lighting at this time. No one spoke either for or against, well, the applicant was there. It stayed on consent agenda and was passed under consent agenda at the Planning Commission.
Okay, and I had it pulled up on my cell phone, but then I lost it. How many units are they planning on putting in here? I know you came up with the sizes. Does it state in the agenda information that the numbers that they're going to put in? I guess my concern is, how close are they to the Tall Timber subdivision? If you looked at the first map, you could see that subdivision that's back there. It's called Tall Timber.
Al, if you'll bring up the zoning map.
I guess it's to the west.
Well, we're talking about you're looking for
Well, first I asked how many units they were going to put in.
I'll have to add that up real quick, but I can add it up here in a second for you and send it to you.
And then over to the west that's a subdivision called Tall Timber. It actually originates on Stagecoach Road and goes back up in there.
I'll have to pull that distance. Are you looking for a distance from property line to property line?
Yeah,
Okay.
just to understand how close it is to that subdivision. And this is a planned development, and will there be any other uses besides storage facilities there?
No, this is specifically requested for this use.
Okay, and you said the hour 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., and,
And they're proposing, there's a gate system that's associated with it.
okay, gate system, okay. I'm wondering at what point we have enough storage units. in this-
Well, I know that has been proposed to the board in the recent past about the number of units per acre in the city. And that really, whether is based upon what type of usage the city is seeing and what they're looking to do. There is a typical distance that you want to put units away from their primary users, which would be multifamily or single-family residential. So somebody's not going to drive 3 miles across the city to go to a storage facility, unless they know the person that's there or something. They're going to look for something closer. We did receive in that time frame also what people were sending to the board of kind of what those numbers looks, but really you need to also determine what the city, whether we are mainly rental, whether we are, home occupation owned type, whether that is driven by more units are needed or not. So I do have a summary that I can send to the board. We've
Okay.
just anticipating, because we have seen a few of these come through for that. We do believe that this is a good reuse for the property location for what it was previously, towing company, to what it would be, the storage facility. And even though we typically put those in industrial, we do see those as pretty much a passive use for those, and would see, we believe, use from the surrounding neighborhoods. So I can get you that summary. I can get the numbers added up for this and sent to the board, and the distance. Are you also wanting the distance back to the east or your left?
Let's see.
Now, that's also across the creek there. I can get both.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
I just drove by there in the last couple of days and wondered what was going to happen to that property, because I knew it had been rezoned for a towing company a number of months back, and it's in pretty sad shape. And so this would be an improvement, I would think, to that piece of property. So if you can give me those, that information, I would appreciate. I just don't want it to be too intrusive on, excuse me, the neighborhoods. And I honestly can't tell from this sketch if it's a long ways or short ways. But that is one of my subdivisions, tall timber, that's to the west of it. And then there's also some residential to the east of it. So that's the piece that I kind of get concerned about, whether it's going to be intrusive on the residential. So I'd like to hold this separate, awaiting your information.
Mayor,
Item 13, this one is senior housing and some commercial real estate on Stagecoach Road. And all of the activities on this happened a year ago. I guess it went through the Planning Commission a year ago. And I know it's saying senior housing. What is the definition of senior housing? Typically, it's 55 and up, and then there's some rules about family members or whatever that can live there. And I know we had an issue at another apartment complex we thought was going to be senior housing, and it wound up it was not. So what are we talking about when we say senior housing? This is a PCD, so if it says senior housing now, and somebody comes in and they want to do something different to it within that 3-year period, it still has to be senior housing. But if the PCD goes away, then is this going to, I don't know what it's going to revert back to. I haven't researched it enough to know. It was industrial. That's what it was, industrial. So it reverts back to industrial and the senior housing status goes away. I'm just a little bit confused about what senior housing means and how we look at that.
Well, you are correct. The board saw this property in 2021. It come through as a PID because there was also some industrial zoning that was closer to Stagecoach. But in that development, it also had some multifamily associated with it, more on the northern end of that development, if you remember. And so what this one is like you explained, it is a mixed commercial. Does have, they were doing it from that PID to the PCD. For senior housing. Now, the senior housing, they didn't really define it in here. It is definitely 55 and over, and all the other conditions that you're was talking about stating on you started a family living with them or percentage that can be in there that's not 55 and older. That's not really in our criteria for zoning. That's more of the federal government entity and the state entities that define that of what can be in the tenants that can be in those designated senior housings. What I've seen is a 55 and older, 60 or 65 and older set. Now, if this doesn't happen, just like the PID previously that didn't happen, They have 3 years from approval to start the plan, to enact the plan. And as long as they are proceeding with that plan stays in place. So if they do not act on that plan within 3 years, it's cause for revocation. So we wouldn't accept another application. It would be an amendment to, like this one is, an amendment to the previous plan development. If they start, they can ask for an extension at 3 years to extend it, more time to be voted on through the planning commission if they get, and they're within that time frame they'd like to start. So it doesn't officially revoke it back. That's not what this ordinance says, that if they don't do it, it revokes back to the underlying zoning. It just is cause for revocation. So they cannot apply for anything other than what this is approved for. And even after those 3 years, it would be they'd either ask for an extension of what they have, or if they've passed that extension time frame, they would be coming back through the planning commission and the board of directors again. Now that's, like I said, that's cause for revocation. So if they approached us like 8 months after and said they were looking to do the same development, and it was within that time frame that they got the extension, we would approve it and proceed.
Within the original PID, did they state that they wanted to do apartments in there?
I think in the original PID, and I'd have to go look and send that to the board so you can see it, but I believe, let's pull up that zoning map to kind of show some of the area, Allie, if we could. They were more on the northern side, the larger side of the tract. So when she pulls it up, you'll kind of see some of that.
It's right next to the city limits. I noticed that. And
so as you approach Stagecoach, it's going to be more commercial at that time, mixed use. It was the larger tract that's more the triangle piece.
right,
To the north is what they were proposing to be multifamily.
right. Well, I guess I'd like to see the details of the 55 and over, what that entails. And if you could let me know if they had planned for apartments on the original PID, I'd like to know that. I know Otter Creek is the nearest residential area, but it looks to me like it's quite a ways away.
It is. I can pull a distance for that too. That's coming across the creek down through there. So
What is that road?
that's all
going-
floodplain, floodway.
I'm sorry.
The creek that's just to your right, that's all floodplain and floodway.
What is that road that goes up through there? Is that to the mining area that is up in there?
Yes, I believe that's an old access to that area. Our map didn't kind of pick that up, I don't believe, as far as the height, but I can get another map kind of shows that area back through there. That goes outside of our city limits.
Okay, I'd like to hold this one separate. It's been almost a year since this was looked at. I don't recall any opposition from any of the area. So awaiting the answers to your questions or to my questions, then I'd like to hold it separate as well. And the last one that I wanted to know about was number 15. And I haven't really delved into this too much, but it's asking for a private club on Guyer Springs Road. Can you tell me a little bit about what this application's?
Yes, this is one of the applications that really comes from the ABC and their definition of private club as opposed to our definition of private club. What the applicant is looking to do is to extend their sale of alcohol from 1 a.m. right now to 2 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday. Currently, they can do that from 1 a.m. on Saturday and midnight on Sunday. And so per the ABC, it has to come before the board for its vote to make that happen. And we do it through a plan development because what you're really doing is you're approving and the application of to the ABC. And then if the ABC can't approve it, ABC can deny it. If it's a planned development, and we've had one come up this year, if the ABC denies the application, even though the board approved that, then a planned development allows us at that time to go and revoke the planned development back through. So it's a zoning that can change based upon what would be the action of the ABC. So that's why they come through as a planned development. It allows us to revoke that use and those hours of operations
Okay,
as
so
approved.
they already have alcohol sales there. They're just
Yes.
wanting to extend the hours. So when I look at the vote from the planning commission, it was 5-4. That's pretty close on the vote. It barely passed. Do you recall what the objections were in regards to the planning commission?
Some of the commissioners just talked about the extending of the hours in the area. I believe Commissioner Brooks might have made that statement. And they asked about the distances, notification. So I believe it was just the extension of the hours was their primary concern on that. There was an individual that did speak against the application at the Planning Commission.
This is fairly close to Forbing Road, and there are some restaurants in the area. Do you know if they sell alcohol in the restaurants that are close to this?
That I don't know.
You don't know the answer to that, okay. You'd be pretty smart if you knew all of that.
Well, I mean, we could go and find out and ask, but we are not the ones that gives the sale of alcohol. For the ABC does that. C3 zoning allows for it, and our operational hours are in C3 are 24/7. It is the state requirement that sets the sale of alcohols and limits the days and the times.
Well, if they're trying to go to 2 a.m., I'm just wondering if there are others in the area that go to 2 a.m. as well, or is it 1 a.m., or are there other locations that sell alcohol?
We can get that information.
The private club designation is the thing that the highway department, not highway, the state ABC is calling it a private club.
Yes, that is their requirement, their designation of it.
So we had one like this on Baseline Road a while back, same kind of deal.
It is, and that's back in when the act became law. That was a way that we sit down as far as planning and development and tried to accommodate what the state law required, and also allowed us, if it didn't proceed through the process with the state, to revoke the use that was approved. Or in this case, the extended hours that was approved. It would just revert back.
Okay. All right. I would like to hold this one separate as well. With the vote 5-4, there could be some individuals that would show up and want to know more about it or be in opposition to it or for it. So I think it would be appropriate to hold it separate.
Yeah, and on a 5-4 vote at the Planning Commission, the motion fails. And per the bylaws of the Planning Commission, if it fails and there was a positive or, the ayes was more than the nays, then we forward it to the board for decision and listing the Planning Commissions that the motion failed at the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I'm seeing Southwest United for Progress is in opposition to it, so we had citizens review it at a meeting and voted against it. So that's really more than one person. So yeah, let's hold that separate, please.
Director Wright?
Yes, Mayor, I wanted to weigh back in on the storage on Colonel Glenn, that area was Ward 6 until the redistricting. And my concern,
No, it wasn't.
well, right across the street from me. You were on one side and I was on the other.
Oh, this is on the
I had
other
the
side.
Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
But my concern is the poor infrastructure, the ditches, and the traffic that this thing is going to generate. Are there any plans? Does this continue with the highway, or does the highway go on Stagecoach? Because I know we have no plans to do any improvements on that section of the road. And that's going to be a lot of storage.
It is, but the traffic that is generated by a storage facility is not the same as generated necessarily by a commercial facility, because it's really dependent upon who is using the storage facilities and when they plan to get there and store their stuff. So you can see storage facilities used during the day. You can see them used at night. If there's a lot of residential around in the area, it'd also be used on the weekends. But it is typically a destination, definitely, that you're going, but you're renting the space. So you're not necessarily generating so many trips per day as by that same number of units per hour per day, because they're not necessarily making 2 or 3 trips back to that unit for that. But we can definitely get you what we believe the trips per day may be from a traffic manual and get that to you. Now, I believe in the write-up, I'm getting back to it in a minute. I'll have to go back to it, but they would still be required for their development to do the boundary street improvements, but that would not extend past their boundary, so that they're not a very wide site, so they're not going too far either to your west or to your east on there to do that. So I definitely can get you what might be by the number of units, the anticipated traffic load on that, and what we believe may come from the adjacent areas, because typically the users of those facilities are the residential in close proximity within so many miles.
Well, it's just it's a red flag going off, because it just seems like every other week we're being asked to approve more mini storage. I don't understand why there's such an influx of this. Trust me on this, anything there would be an improvement over what is there. So I'm kind of like, but good grief, how many mini storages does one city need?
And that's where I was talking about, we began to research that on some of those, and we do have, and I'll provide a little summary to go out to the board on what we have currently on that data. I can't say right now that we are maxed out on storage facilities. It really depends on what community Little Rock is. Some larger or same size cities that may have a different type of seasonal use, maybe a little bit less. People that have a lot more single-family residential or multifamily, it plays into it in a certain area, may have more storage in a certain area as opposed to right by the single-family residential. So we have some of that data. I can provide that to the board so you can start seeing what we are starting to gather together. So I can't tell you right now at this moment that we are maxed out on storage units.
Okay. Well, also too, that site was considered for a little store there. I think it may have been even a Dollar General or something, and they were going to sell alcohol, and I didn't want to infringe upon that Jehovah's Witness church across the street. I don't know if they call it a church or hall, but so this would be rather benign as opposed to something that would negatively impact them. But my final question is, there's a little neighborhood right there. I don't know if it's Marigold Street or Marigold, but I know the street is Marigold. I don't know what you call that neighborhood. Was there any opposition from them regarding this? Because it would impact them a whole lot more than it would Tall Timber.
You pull that one back up. and
Were
get
they
down
even
to the
contacted?
opposition. I do not believe anybody was there
Were they even contacted?
speaking for, there was, nobody showed up speaking for or against the
Were they
item.
contacted?
Yes, they contacted per the bylaws, within, everybody was mailed the 200 feet. And then we sent out an email, and I can get, we save a copy of those emails we send out to all registered neighborhood associations in the city. We followed our bylaws, we sent out to neighborhood associations, and we also posted in the paper.
Well, they're
So-
not organized as a neighborhood association, or at least they never were in the past.
Okay, well, if
As
they-
long as the homeowner was notified that something was going to be developing there.
I will check with the 200 feet. If they are not registered with the city as a neighborhood association and not on our list, then we would not have sent that out.
And if that's more than 200 feet away, they wouldn't know anything about it, right?
Yes, except for it's ran in the paper by state law, at least 15 days.
Do they even print a
Prior
paper
to.
anymore? So I don't even know why
I
we
understand
say
we
that
have to meet the
anymore.
state law requirements, so we have to send it in a newspaper of prominent circulation 15 days prior, and we send it in a daily record.
Well, BJ, if they upset it, they go call you, okay?
Yeah, that's why I asked for the distance to Tall Timber and to that location to the east.
Anyway,
And then it looks like there's some folks across the street as well.
So I'll get that, make sure I send that and summarize it for the board.
the house across the street on Allard is way up a hill, so they won't, theirs is a private drive, so until they come down and go out, there's not a lot right there, but I am concerned about that marigold, but,
Okay, yeah, we'll send out, we have all that. We keep all the notifications, all the certified mail receipts, and so they're all scanned in, and we can send it to the board.
But I do believe anything would be an improvement over what's there, aesthetically. Yeah. Thank you.
Director Peck?
Thank you. I'd like a presentation on item 14, Jamie, the villas at
I
Autumn
still
Road.
have questions on item 15.
But I acknowledge Director Peck. We'll come to you, Director
Okay.
Adcock. We're going in order. Director
I just
Peck?
don't go anyplace.
Did you get that, Jamie? Item 14?
Yes, ma'am, I am
Okay, thank
opening
you.
it up.
Thank you.
If we could bring up the zoning map first, please. I'll kind of give a general location. So right now, those are existing single-family residential homes that are on Autumn Road, just north of Chenal Parkway. Or I guess it also changes to Executive Center right there at Autumn. And then the Birchwood subdivision is just to the north of that. So this tract of land is about 5 acres for that. So if we go to the site sketch plan. So what they're looking to do with this development, it is a planned residential development. They're looking to put in 51 zero lot line patio homes. So what that puts them to is a density of about 10 units per the acre in general. They're wanting to have front setbacks of 20 feet, rear of 10 feet, and the side of 7 feet, and then 0 feet. So what that means is one lot will have 7 feet from the building to the lot line. The other one will sit pretty close to the lot line without going over. That's the 0 lot line setback, which is allowed in our subdivision codes. The square footages, 1,200 square foot to 1,400 square foot. The heights are not to exceed the single-family residential are 35 feet. They will have 1 or 2 car garages attached, so that will help reduce some of the on-street parking that may be needed. We felt like this, as far as development-wise, it is denser than what Birchwood is seeing to the north on that. But we are seeing, and the board has seen, and so the planning commission also, several residential developments that has come that are the zero lot lines to get a little more dense for the area. There were several people that spoke against the application at the Planning Commission. I believe there were 5 that spoke against it, but there were several others that were there at the development. Currently, the property is on the land use. We can bring up the land use plan. The board had approved and looking to take it more of an office use at that location. You do have other commercial uses adjacent. There is a current office that's across the street, just to the east of it, and a storage facility. I think if everybody's familiar with the area, just south of that on Chenal, you're looking at the bookstore, the Trader Joe's, that type of area. So all the traffic will go to a signalized intersection at Autumn Road. Some of the concerns that the citizens come and spoke against the application was traffic, was what's going to happen on Autumn. How's that going to affect the subdivision? I'm sure that both Director Wright and yourself has either heard it in the past or in the future of their concern, the neighborhood's concerns of cut-through traffic. They do have a couple of speed humps within that subdivision because it is utilized for that, and that was a question that was also raised at the Planning Commission. Their main concern was in our land use plan, Al, if you could pull that land use map up, we show an area of open space or green space for that. And that's primarily tied to the office zoning because it's a different zone. So if they do go office, then a buffer would be required that is adjacent to the backs of the homes right there on Birchwood Drive. Now, in this being a residential zone, it's currently zoned and they're looking just to do a planned development residential, then no buffer is needed. And so one of the concerns brought up by the people in opposition was a request for a buffer between that planned development and the single-family residential in Birchwood. Zoning code-wise, that's not a landscape buffer that's required for like uses.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard from several people, and I think that my colleagues have also gotten letters a few weeks ago from people in Birchwood, and you basically described their concerns, traffic being the primary one. I'm one of those guilty people. I cut through all the time when I go to Trader Joe's, and Autumn Road is already a nightmare. The neighbors, many of them have been there for many, many years. Those houses, for the most part, were built in the 60s. It's not just traffic, although I'm very concerned about traffic, but historically all the flooding that's happened there. I mean, we had to demolish 2 houses in Birchwood Circle. They're concerned that this site is the culprit of a lot of the drainage and the runoff. So that's another thing that they're very concerned about because of the history of flooding there. But the primary thing is the traffic, which who has not been on Autumn?
And I did explain.
There's some major neighborhood opposition. I see that the Planning Commission voted 7-2, and the staff is recommending approval. The other thing is they may have gotten letters, but the developer never offered to meet with the Birchwood community, which they resent, frankly.
And they did speak about the drainage. A lot of that drainage, I believe one of the individuals that spoke was more downstream of that. And it is a subdivision that as Chenal grew and Markham grew, the development, they were there and development happened around them.
Right.
And so what I explained in the Planning Commission is that they will provide detention per our ordinances and our drainage manual. They will also have to analyze the 100-year storm event, which is the flood event due to a previous court case, we put that on there now that we analyze that for the subdivision. They are not required by our boundary street to improve the entirety of Autumn Road from where it's done now back to Birchwood Drive. They will have to do it along their frontage accordingly, but not necessarily close out Autumn Road in its entirety for build out. And there is a traffic at Autumn, like I said, it is signalized. And they expressed some backup concerns about how far that would back up through there. I too have drove that area. I live out in that area going to that commercial retail shopping center. And there is times that when you pull out, there is stacking on Autumn. But if you typically wait a little bit, you're not waiting 10, 15 minutes to get out and get in the lane, but there is time that you are waiting. It also would depend on what goes in development in that location. That also, we explained it there, and also some of the commissioners explained some of that at that meeting, that if you look at the land use, then you got to look at what can go there. An office development, depending upon the type of office development, unless it is a single use. When I'm talking single use, I'm talking maybe a single dental office or a single doctor's office at that location. They're allowed to do per the setbacks and stuff, but even an O1, I wouldn't see an O2 type office development, or O3. That might be a little bit more intense. Depends on the size of the building and the number of offices in that location. That may generate as much, if not more, traffic than a residential development. It will be a little bit different times of the day. Residential is more, you're leaving in the morning, coming back in the afternoon. Office can be spread out throughout the day a little bit more, but it could generate, as far as vehicles per day, maybe not an O1, but definitely an O2.